Yes.
valid point before we hit the go live button.
Moustaches.
Well, it wasn't about moustaches. You were saying Coca-Cola into the microphone, and it gave me posed a question in my mind, Jake. If someone was to actually approach us, Coca-Cola or Pepsi, which one would you rather? Would you rather Coca-Cola or Pepsi be a sponsor?
It's a good question. Look, it's a question for the ages.
Is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've always preferred the taste of Coke, a cola. Big fan. But look, if it was a competition between the two, I'd probably take Coca-Cola Amatil because they're, much richer.
No.
But I'm not gonna kick Pepsi out of the bed if they're offering. Geez,
Yeah. All right.
if Pepsi are like, we'll sponsor you, but only if you don't take the money from Coke. I'd be like, well, that's still money, so yeah, I'm in. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
I certainly don't regret asking. Let me. let me hit the button.
Oh gosh.
Which I think is the right button. All right. Hello and welcome to the Pouch, the podcast equivalent of a wet wood pile on a freezing winter day that aims to take a gander at the week in Australian news and/or politics. I'm Greg. Gosh, if only there was some dramatic political event to distract everyone from New South Wales having 10 new cases. Savage.
Oh, and I'm Jake. If I thought something would have happened, I'd have worn my hat far Wharton. On today's episode, we talk leadership, climate, refugee policy, and so very much more, Greg.
Oh, I'm excited, Jake.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
excited in weeks. In the spirit of reconciliation and recognition, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are podcasting today, and we recognise their continuing connection to land, water, and community. We pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging.
And this week our thoughts are
It
with...
says Jake.
Yeah. This week, our thoughts are with Victorians? No, it's New South Welshmen.
No, Victorian. Yeah.
Victorians have got new cases again.
Yeah, but this is about the storms, Jake.
Oh, this is about the storms, of course, yeah. Our thoughts are with Victorians who have recently battled through catastrophic storms and floods just seconds after being recently released from their lockdown. 2 people tragically lost their lives. There are 120 troops on the ground to assist with the cleanup and to bring in much needed generators to houses that are still without power. More than 2,000 homes in the region are still in darkness as power restoration efforts hit a snag last week. They were talking about in excess of around 3 weeks to get power back to some of those places. That's crazy.
It is. It's one of those things that you just feel like shouldn't be happening in Australia,
Yeah, I know, right? We're the land of coal-fired power plants. You just like you got some coal in the ground, no worries. You bring it into Parliament, and then you throw it in your coal-fired generator, and then you're away. Well, like where's the coal? Where's the coal? You shouldn't be afraid of coal, Greg.
I'm not.
Is what I'm trying to say.
I'm not, Jake. And in fact, coal had some really good news this week, and we'll get to that in a second. Some wonderful news for coal as of this morning.
Yes,
if I was some coal.
It's in the name, really. Coalition.
Oh,
coalition.
That's good. I'm going to write that down.
No. Yeah,
that's a new T-shirt right there.
Coalition. Yeah, I love it.
Thank you for wearing your blue checkered shirt as well, Jake. I'm glad that
it's actually purple.
No, it's not.
It's actually different shades of purple. You just can't see it because I'm broadcasting in high definition, which means I'm delivering in low definition. Because of Australia's NBN network. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Well, it's high definition for rural Queensland.
Yeah, exactly. It's the high definition that Kevin Rudd just endeavoured to get for all of us.
We have a lot to get through
We do.
today, and we especially are excited to be speaking a lot about Barnaby Joyce. Gosh, I'm glad he's back on the radar, and we'll get to that in just one second. What I do want to do, Jake, is I want to talk about this. And this it sounds like I'm about to launch into some sort of advertising thing, but I'm not.
If you don't, I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah, this is my warm-up story. I just wanted to bring up, there is ABC are doing this cool thing called Australia Talks. I don't know if you've done the survey.
I have. Yeah, it took about 30 minutes.
It didn't take very long, right? But what does take a long time is to actually sit there and think about the questions. So just a little bit of background. They polled more than 60,000 Australians across every state and territory. They asked almost 600 questions not found in the census, covering issues big and small, to learn about what matters to us all. Now, the questions range, Jake. There is a range of questions, and they catch you off guard. I don't know if you were caught off guard when you were doing it. I was caught off guard.
I would say I was caught on guard because I was ready for some quirky questions.
Were you?
Yeah.
I wasn't. So, well, okay, so you get questions like this, right? So some of the example questions were, should the coronavirus vaccine be mandatory? Do you like your boss? Is racism prevalent in Australian sport, right? And for some of that, I just had to put, I don't know, right? I don't know. Is racism prevalent in Australian sport? I don't know. Prevalent? I don't know. Like, you just have to think about it. So you're sitting there and you're agonizing over these these questions, and you're really, really getting right into it. And then a question pops up, which is like, how often do you change your bed sheets?
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, that just really
makes a lot of sense. It was a really hard segue. Like, that's, yeah.
Your brain just isn't ready for it. I don't know. Yeah. Do they treat those? I don't know what the scientific method might be. Is it like a palate cleanser? Like, is it after trying a whole bunch of wines and being really intense, I just sort of scull some water and I feel a bit better or something? Like, is that what the bedsheet questions were like? They threw me off guard.
Yeah. I tend to think it's, you say palate cleanser. I say, removing the wax that you've slowly attached to your leg with a sheet of paper and then just like tearing it off.
Yeah.
It's just such a weird segue, right? And there were a few of them. There were a few twisty turnies in and around there. But yeah, no, there were a few.
I have a secret that I believe would end my relationship with my partner or family.
Yes.
Like, strongly agree, strongly disagree.
Yeah. There's some good questions.
Like, what if you're using Google Chrome and Google's just like, this is great. This is great news. I suppose they'd already have some idea, wouldn't they?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, they've already started sending you targeted ads for divorce lawyers, right?
Okay. All right. And just a quick update as well. New South Wales are in strife, Jake. We are in absolute turmoil here. It's chaos. I can't tell you the chaos. The real chaos is not the numbers. Or the way that they're delivered, right? The way that they're delivered, it says 5 acquired before 8 p.m., including 2 reported yesterday, plus 7 after 8 p.m. So, you can do the maths on that one. According to some news outlets, that means that we have 10 new cases. The official numbers, however, are 5 new cases because we have an 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. An 8 p.m.
reporting
to 8 p.m.
period.
Reporting period. But the press conference, of course, takes place at 11 a.m. So this is where the confusion comes in. But none of that, Jake, that's not where the mental gymnastics comes into it. The mental gymnastics comes into it when you try and justify not going into lockdown. Or calling for a snap lockdown, as they like to refer to it, after laughing at Victorians, after laughing, Jake, after using all of your energy to laugh at Victorians for months on end about their lockdowns. The mental gymnastics comes from trying to figure out how we're going to justify not going into lockdown.
Yeah, it was quite interesting reading a few of the news headlines. Actually, one of my favourite morning activities is, and it happens pretty well morning after morning, but it seems that I'm getting dressed at around the same time that the ABC News is doing their wrap up of newspaper headlines from around Australia, and it was quite interesting to watch the contrast 2 weeks ago, of the the incendiary coverage of Victorians, snap circuit breaker lockdown. They're using inflammatory language, even for those who prefer words said correctly, around things like, the
all 14th of you.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Around things like the the traces, the track and traces, they were frantically scrambling in Victoria, whereas in New South Wales they are prepared and making calls. Or in Victoria a couple of weeks ago, the madness continues with another lockdown. And then today, preparation continues for how tracking and tracing will get us around this next lockdown. It's just really interesting language. While, and I draw this comparison because it is a Labor government versus a Liberal government. In both cases, the incumbent leaders and the incumbent parties have, really soldiered on through the lockdowns, through the COVID-19 lockdowns, and
People
subsequent
love themselves a good lockdown, don't they?
exactly. Well, no, they abhor it with every fibre of their being. But nonetheless, there are two different strategies. Exactly, there are two different strategies, and it was really quite interesting how our typically conservative, very right-leaning, if not right-falling towards the right, leaning so hard that they've fallen over towards the right, newspapers, how they reacted to the two different states' lockdown strategies.
Yeah, exactly, and you bring up an important point, Jake. Believe it or not, and that is that one of the numbers that we actually need to look at is that there's the number of people who weren't in isolation while they had COVID. And that would go down to two numbers. So, we can play the numbers how we like. If you're the media, you're saying that there's 10 new cases reported today. If you're like me and trying to justify not going into lockdown, then you are saying that there was only two of them walking around. So, but anyway.
Quite interesting. My lovely mother has just travelled to Western Australia to be with my little brother and her grandchildren, and she has left the relative sanctity of Brisbane, of the Gold Coast, really, where there are zero cases. Walked into Western Australia, and because there were a couple of cases in Queensland, in the region of Queensland, of the state of Queensland, she was required to quarantine until she was able to prove that she did not have COVID-19. Yeah, so it's just interesting the way that the different states react to a case springing up anywhere.
I think so. Look, if we were in Western Australia, it'd be a very, very different story at the moment. So, there are politics at play here, and we hope that it's just not too much to wreck anyone's lives, whether it be through businesses with closing, whether it be through not locking down quickly enough. We hope that politicians are doing the right thing and listening to the advice of the medical experts. Now, speaking of listening to the advice of medical experts, Jake, news just in, like literally my phone just lit up and it said that quarantine-free travel from New South Wales to New Zealand has been paused for 70
Has been
hours.
paused, yeah.
She does love a good pause, doesn't she?
Absolutely. Look, it's a cautious pause. It's actually, and funnily enough,
cautious pause.
It is a sound, considered and cautious pause. Yeah,
I think so.
Very similar to what Gladys Berejiklian did in front of the television a couple of weeks ago on a Wednesday. At about 4 p.m., standing in front of the television, wearing a I think it was a scarf with her beloved Blues festooned, and of course it was several hours beforehand. However, the caption on her Twitter post suggested that she was standing in front of the TV waiting. She was going to be waiting for some time. In fact, probably 3 or 4 hours, I thought it was. Anyway, it was quite an interesting thing. One might think that the social media team for Gladys Berejiklian, Premier of New South Wales, was quite a genius for creating a stir around the Blues and the Blues victory.
Isn't it? Now, I think if I'm clever enough, Jack, I can actually bring up a picture there. That's John Barilaro.
Very nice. Good on you, John.
Barilaro doing a mock version of it. The original version, it's very good, isn't he? He's very funny, John Barilaro. Hey,
is he?
Him and Friendly Geordie's getting along very well recently, I've noticed. There we go. There's the original.
Yeah.
So there's the original
Love it.
meme holding a can of Coke. You know, it doesn't seem stiff and posed at all. In
No,
fact, I
no.
think I have seen cardboard cutouts with more life than that particular pose.
No, I mean, look, you can definitely tell that there's depth, like in her physicality there. There's depth, and therefore it's not a cardboard cutout. But it was interesting, right? It was interesting. It was a very interesting, memeable thing.
Yeah, Twitter came alight.
It
Watching the hydrogen fuel source explode for our sun and all sorts of things. Anyway,
Speaking of Twitter being alight,
how good is it now? Twitter now. Are we doing Barnaby?
I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I can do the segue. Have you got one ready? Because I got one ready, Jack. I mean, I can go from
You
Twitter to
seg.
Barnaby.
Seg away.
All right. Now you might remember, Barnaby Joyce, right? You might. He's back in the scene. You might.
Who?
You might remember him from such wonderful Twitters as the what was that weird Christmas cattle thing that he did? Was it at Christmas time?
Oh
or
yeah,
something?
yeah. When he
did a
was
little
getting
selfie.
hay off the old back of the ute. Yeah.
Yeah, and
We've got to remember that we got to answer to a higher power. Of course.
well, that's right. And he
Climate
does it.
change is about action, but we answer to a higher power.
And he also does the whole Twitter that the blog into the camera, the vlog into the camera, and he's saying things like, I want less government in my life. I need less government. I'm sick of the government. I want less government in my life. So you might remember him from amazing Twitter situations like that. But for those of us who don't tweet on the regular, i.e. moi, I remember him from resigning 3 years ago.
Yes.
And then going into obscurity before I saw him. Happy to catch him on Q&A a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, he's an interesting chap. Probably interesting, more interesting to Scott Morrison at the moment than he is to most of Australia. It was announced. It was announced just yesterday morning, that Barnaby Joyce, the former leader of the Nationals, would become the current leader of the Nationals.
And therefore,
After
the Deputy Prime Minister of
yes,
Australia.
the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. Which, look, it's a really quite an interesting occasion. But we woke up this morning to having an acting Prime Minister in Michael McCormack, because of course Scott Morrison is in quarantine
Yes.
in the lodge at the moment,
Yes.
following his little foray into the UK to talk climate this last week. So we have an acting Prime Minister in Michael McCormack, which was all day yesterday, even though he had been deposed, and all morning this morning until Barnaby Joyce was sworn in to be the deputy leader of Australia, the deputy of the coalition, or the coalition, if you like. Greg.
I do like.
Oh yeah. So,
Just,
it was quite interesting.
a little bit of background on Barnaby Joyce before you go ahead.
Please.
His electorate is that New England? Yes,
Hunter,
New
yep.
England, right?
Yep.
So New England, and now just some things, where he stands on certain political issues. Abortion. Joyce is opposed to abortion. Partnership with Family First. In October 2004, Joyce expressed offence at a pamphlet handed out by Family First candidate Danny Nalia, which identified bottle shops, brothels, Masonic lodges, mosques, and Hindu and Buddhist temples as strongholds of Satan. Medicinal cannabis. Medicinal cannabis. In June 2014, Joyce changed his views about medicinal cannabis and publicly supported calls for the introduction of a medicinal cannabis trial following a high-profile campaign led by a young man in his constituency. Same-sex marriage. In August 2014, Joyce spoke out in opposition to same-sex marriage, attending several rallies on the matter in Canberra. Death penalty.
He's a very strong fan of the sanctity of marriage, yes.
Yes, death penalty. Joyce called for a national debate on capital punishment in Australia. Refugee intake. 2015, Joyce was the first senior minister to call for the Australian government to accept more Syrian refugees in response to the humanitarian crisis engulfing Turkey and Europe. So gives you a bit of an idea of where he stands on the social issues. On environmental issues, Jake, this is the proverbial nuts and bolts, if you will, of why he got into it. But it does, those social issues, ABC, his little quiz on the ABC would be a very interesting response to read.
It would, yeah. He's a multifaceted guy. Like he's a guy that sits in the reasonably hard right on a number of issues, mainly social, and he's also, funnily enough, a guy who sits probably right of centre on a number of economic policy issues. He is, he's a big proponent of the farms. He's a big proponent of mining and coal, and that's really what caused the National Party to go for a tilt this week. To make the decision to spill the leadership. Essentially, last week, after having our illustrious Prime Minister, one Scott Morrison, talking in the UK to his leadership counterparts as part of the what was G7, thank you. Yes, we're an observer of the G7. However, Scott Morrison did use the occasion to catch up with his pals Boris Johnson, who will be running the COP 20? No, it's the Glasgow later on this year to talk about ambitions to get the world to a net zero carbon economy by 2050. And of course, Scott Morrison used the occasion to talk up a free trade deal and to put a few signatures to paper. But he also used that occasion to start talking about his bona fides, about Australia's credentials in the direction of moving towards net zero by 2050, when possible.
So you're saying there's a connection, right, between...
There is a very hard connection, yes.
Right. So the politics at play here is that Scott Morrison is between a rock and a hard place when it comes to our climate
action on climate change. Yeah, exactly.
Our action on climate change, because he needs to be seen to be doing something, particularly on the world stage. However, we don't. A lot of people here in Australia don't want him to play too hard ball in that particular sport, if you will.
Well, I think what you'll find from things like the Australia Talk survey is that a majority of Australians, and it's way bigger than just a single poll on put out by ABC, but a majority of Australians want action on climate change, and a majority of Australia think that we are doing not enough on towards combating climate change.
Right.
But it is a matter of fact that over the last several months, our Prime Minister has been making sort of slowly. I've heard the term crab walking towards, which is a fun little term, but crab walking towards commitment to net zero emissions in Australia by 2050, and essentially. He's been saying we will achieve net zero, preferably by 2050, and that saying did occur. Yeah, so
it's not something that Barnaby's a big fan of.
So it's something that the Nationals have not agreed to. So the coalition party room the coalition cabinet have not agreed to net zero emissions by 2050. And in fact, the Nationals and this includes Michael McCormack as the former leader have been dead set against that level of action, i.e. Net zero by 2050. Of course, they've got a resources minister in Keith Pitt, who is very, very pro-coal. You've got Matt Canavan, who was actually Barnaby Joyce's former chief of staff.
He's the one who called for the spill motion.
That's right. And
the surprise spill motion. We were all surprised.
Exactly.
Everyone was surprised.
Exactly. Well, Barnaby was surprised. He said, had I known that something was going to happen, I would have worn my hat, which is a reasonable statement because the man is rarely photographed without his hat. But he left it at home the day before. But yeah, look, it was really interesting. But it seems to be all over this premise of action on climate change. The Nationals in the very recent past have called for a implementation planning study or similar on new coal-fired power plants in various places. Of course, their essentially attempting to make the argument that the economics do stack up towards creating new coal-fired power plants when the private sector is not even willing to go in on a gas-fired power plant when that is requires vastly less infrastructure. So why on earth would any private entity go towards a dying economy? So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
He is well behind that premise of promoting coal in Australia and of doing exactly as little as they possibly can to protect coal jobs and to prevent the transition away from coal mining.
Right. I sort of heard a few things this afternoon, like a few of the interviews, and I still wasn't 100% clear exactly what Barnaby Joyce's view was on climate change. I couldn't figure out whether he believed in climate change, whether he thought it was all right, and that actually he just wanted to make sure that regional Australia was at the table making some decisions around climate change towards this, whether or not we were using gas as our sort of bridge towards climate action, or whether or not we're towards renewable sources, or whether or not we're just going straight to renewable sources, that they weren't being consulted, that was his main sort of game. Like he would say things like, well, I watch very closely the science and I pay very close attention to what the scientists say. I just want to make sure that the regional communities are at the table making the decisions as well. And
he's vacillated between a number of different I mean, he has suggested that Twitter video that you referenced previously, where he's getting where he's shoveling hay off the back of his ute and looking into the camera very sweatily, as though he's a working man working on his farm, making sure that his livestock is fed.
Yeah.
All the while saying, I've never argued that climate change doesn't exist. I've just questioned whether whether economically we need to make major changes in order to rectify it, or whether putting a price on it is going to impact the actual climate change itself. He has previously suggested that he does not believe in climate change, but I think he was pulled kicking and screaming into, I suppose, alignment with reality. But,
I just typed the word climate into the Nationals website because I couldn't actually find anything. And I just typed the word in climate, and there's not a lot.
No.
It's not real clear. It says the Morrison government will continue the Liberal National strong record of supporting practical and meaningful environmental action that gets results.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just doesn't really, like, there's no oomph. I suppose my point here would be a lot of the people who I heard talking about the fact that they wanted Barnaby Joyce in, they were saying he's straight up, you know exactly where he stands on this sort of stuff. He speaks for the people. He's, there's no argument about where he stands, and that's what we need at the moment. That's not what we were getting from Michael McCormack. We need someone to stand up for us and do all these things. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like, it's hard for me to figure out where he stands on climate change and what's happening there and that sort of thing. I know that he wants to stick up for regional Australia, and I know that he worked very, very hard for them, and I know that he wants to, do what's best for, probably himself first and then the other people, But he works very hard, but it's still not very clear. I don't know. I think there's a little bit of a mind play at work there to say that he's straight up about everything and that we know exactly where we stand with everything.
No, I don't think we do at all, and this is the nature of backbencher parliamentarians that find themselves on very much in the front bench. Shortly after, he spent the last 3 years on the backbench following his resignation as leader, and during that time, he made a number of statements. He has talked about climate change. He's opened bridges that he was not responsible for, let alone the funding for those bridges, which we covered on this show some time ago. He has, he's gone and helped out at his local charities. He's helped out the rural fireys in his local area, or at least took a photo with them. He is a man of the people. Many people remark about his, he is a very smooth parliamentarian. He's very convincing. He makes a good point, but he has said a lot in the last 3 years, and it will be interesting to see how much of that remains as Nationals policy, and how much of it, Barnaby Joyce has the conviction to maintain by way of bringing it into the Nationals cabinet room. Because one of the things, and actually maybe it's a segue into the next article, sure. But one of the things is that Barnaby has had a position on the Biloela family.
Yeah.
The so-called Biloela family, the group of four former Sri Lankan refugees, who their children were born in Australia following an unsuccessful asylum claim. They did arrive here via boat, and Barnaby Joyce's feedback in the last few months, which has been consistent over the last couple of years, has been that this family should or deserves to be returned to Biloela. However, they are just right now in Perth. Pardon me. They're just right now in Perth, following a very, very long and isolated experience on Christmas Island, following their ousting from Australia, essentially because they were refugee. Well, they were asylum. They were claiming asylum, yeah. And their claims to asylum were rejected. Yeah. Their refugee status was denied. They were raided very early in the morning in Biloela, this very small country town. And I'm aware, Greg, that you know a lot more about Biloela than I do.
I lived in Biloela. Hello, all our listeners from Biloela. I did. Exactly. I lived and worked in Biloela for 2 years.
Beautiful little country town.
Yeah, beautiful little country town. It's got a KFC,
and
a
hospital.
It had a KFC. I presume it's still there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, you're right. You're exactly right. There is a big link here. The family supporters welcome Barnaby Joyce's appointment. Mr. Joyce has been vocal in calling for the family to return to Biloela. They say he is in a powerful position to help. But just before we do go on to that one, I know that that's the story that we're doing. I just want to mention that I just spent a few minutes on the Nationals website, Jake, and and it's got, like, again, it's so funny because there's spelling mistakes and grammatical errors all over the place. It's so weird. You can't actually click.
Oh, they're all country, Greg.
You can't even click on any
no spell checkers
or anything.
In the country.
It's really weird. Anyway, so it does say, with a strong track record of delivering infrastructure and promoting job creation and investment, the Nationals has an active interest in climate change.
Promoting it.
So they don't. That's what I mean. Like, they don't. The Nationals have an active interest in climate change. Like, it's not, yeah. And then again, it's not clear to me, so I don't know.
That was written by a junior staffer.
I think so. There's honestly, like, I had to do some.
That was a very long sentence.
Well,
it was a very long sentence.
Apparently it continues on for the whole list, and then anyway, there's
all commas, no full stops.
Where there should be spaces, and there's all. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's not too important. What is important is the impact that will have on our nation, Jake. And as you've said, they're already saying that he's in a pretty powerful position, especially in regards to this Biloela family. So what is happening with this Biloelan family, and I don't know. I don't feel like we should be calling them the Biloelan family.
Well, this is the thing. They are universally referred to as the Biloela family.
Right.
You would find that most people who even have a passing interest in this story will refer to them as the Biloela family. I mean, it's obviously part of the.
Is it
Murugappan
family?
Yeah. Yeah.
Murugappan.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And it is all. It is all part of the. I won't refer to it as propaganda, but it is all part of the marketing, I suppose, of this. That we are led to believe essentially that this is a family of great conviction, a family that during an extended visa to assess their asylum claims, they were completely integrated into the community. The husband worked in the local meatworks. The local mother, she worked in a number of charities, in addition to raising their child, and they were a family of great repute in the community. They were well integrated. They were waving to their friends and neighbours. They were well known across the community, and they were raided in the very early hours. One morning after the mother's visa expired, and they were raided, and essentially they were going to be kicked out of Australia, but there was an injunction placed. They were flown then into Christmas Island, and they've been sitting there. Australia's, it's called Australia's largest offshore detention facility. It's our only offshore detention facility. It is also Australian territory, despite being several thousand kilometres off the coast of Western Australia. But the family has spent almost a couple of years there in isolation. They are the only family on Christmas Island. The government has spent an extraordinary amount of money caring for this family at this place, and I'm not arguing against the expense of money. I'm arguing that there's probably better ways to spend that money, such as probably just bring them into the community. They have 2 children who have been born in Australia and are thus Australian. And while there's all sorts of arguments to be made against the premise of, I think the Americans refer to it as anchor babies, as babies who are born, giving the parents essentially right to citizenship by ascent as opposed to descent. But while there are arguments against that, it's very difficult to deny that the expense, the lengths that Australia has gone to punish these people for having the audacity to leave their country of birth, that was at the time that they left in a particular strife. It was a war-torn area. They left that area. They came to Australia via boat, and they have been punished. Just absolutely punished ever since. That is, the reason that defence and immigration ministers are stating for why we should not enable them to become citizens or similar is that if we blink, Greg, those boats will restart again. But there are no boats, Greg. There are no boats.
We're not tracking those boats. Now, it is important to note as well that Tharnika, the 4-year-old girl, was in Perth Hospital, where she had been receiving treatment for a blood transfusion, for a blood infection, after being medically evacuated from Christmas Island. And they had been reunited as well. So they said that they are back in Biloela. They wanted to go back. They wanted to go back to Biloela, and they are safe if they go back there. They have work, their families have friends. They refer to Biloela as home. So, it's a tricky one. Now, I know that you mentioned a few things there, Jake, and it's not as cut and dry as what some people might think, especially when it comes to our political leaders, because I know that David Spears was interviewing Adam Bandt on Insiders the other week, the leader of the Greens Party, and David had to ask Adam Bandt about 3 or 4 times, probably even more, I would say, about whether or not he thinks that people who are born in Australia should remain in Australia, even if they're born to people who are seeking asylum. And he had to be pressed on that about 4 or 5 times during that particular interview. So, even from our political leaders, even from the political leaders that you think would be super cut and dry on this particular situation, he did eventually say, yes, he thinks that they should stay in Australia. But it wasn't that cut and dry during the interview. It took a long time to reef that out of him. So my question is why? Why, if that's your position, why not just sort of say it?
It's weasel words, and it's because he doesn't want to be the person who makes an argument for restarting the boats, because that is how it will be played out. That is how it'll play out. Essentially, if he argues for asylum by assent, he is making an argument for people coming here via, inverted commas, illegal means, and providing an avenue. But look, you can end the argument by saying even if you were to give this whole family citizenship today, there is nobody who is likely to get on a boat that is going to look at the plight of this family, having spent, almost a decade under detention, repeated detention, in isolation. Their child has just been, thanks to lack of access to appropriate medical care, has, come reasonably close. The kid had septicemia. Like that's a pretty serious issue. And it's all because of this government's policy on immigration. There's no person that is, tossing up whether or not they get on a boat and looking at this case and saying, "Oh, look, I can just tough it out for a decade of torture." No worries. And then after a decade of torture, my kid almost dying from an illness. Like there is nobody who is going to make that argument for themselves towards getting on a boat to come to Australia to just to go through that. The deterrence has occurred. Yeah, let's just give them a home, for goodness sake.
It is a tricky one. I think it is a bit of a hard one to sell. All right. Now, speaking of getting in and out of Australia, Jake, our esteemed Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, he did actually leave the country for a little while. He did cop a little bit of flack from people who are still trapped overseas and cannot get back home to Australia, nor were they receiving support over the last few weeks about getting home again. Yet he was just, rubbing it in their faces, Jake, gallivanting around in his private jet. I think he even went and saw Matthias Cormann at some point, didn't he? He dropped in and said g'day to his mate Matthias Cormann.
G'day, Matty.
Yeah, g'day. And I'm sure they shared a bit of a laugh about everything. And then he flew back home without any issue whatsoever. Yeah, shared a Foster's and then flew back home without an issue whatsoever. But he was overseas for a very important two-way meeting with the president of the United States of America, Mr. Joe Biden. Of course, that two-way meeting turned into a three-way meeting when Boris Johnson was injected into that. But they did apparently talk about everything except climate change at that particular...
Yeah. They spoke about iced Vovos and Vegemite.
And how they might be able to invigorate the iced Vovo economy given China's, involvement in everything else that we do. So apparently they didn't talk about climate change, but they probably spoke a lot about China. Not that the contents of the meeting was revealed.
No. Nor should we expect it to be, of course.
No. But he was over there at the G7. What did he do, Jake? Tell us what happened. What did he do? What did he wear? Did he wear the gown from Gucci?
No, actually, he was rocking a Hawaiian shirt and shorts. He thought it was appropriate because, of course, everyone knows him internationally as the Prime Minister that left his country during a bushfire crisis, only to go to Hawaii. So he thought, hey, what he did an Eminem, right? He's like takes all he bullies himself essentially to the other rapper in order to in that illustrious movie 8 Mile, in order to completely take the wind from the opposing rapper's sails. This analogy totally works.
Bring it back. Scott Morrison arrives in UK for G7 amid protests for climate change action.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, he did. What did he do? He discussed a bilateral free trading agreement, which was in fact the very first one that the UK had begun to sign. Because of course it's not all fully signed off, but it is the first one.
Is it an in principle one? I love a good in principle agreement.
It's a little bit further than in principle. It's a little bit further than in principle, Greg, because the in principle side of this agreement actually occurred about 8 to 9 months ago when the Prime Minister was there previously. So this is more sort of moving towards on paper in principle, the next level up.
Right.
And what else did he do? He spoke about security threats. I want to talk about
this UK deal because it was announced on Tuesday, the 15th of June. The final agreement has not been published yet, so we don't know the full details. The UK government says the agreement means British products such as cars, Scotch whisky, biscuits, and ceramics would be cheaper to sell to Australians. Now that is exciting, Jake.
Which part?
Just all of it. I'll say it again for you. Ready? Cars,
Wow.
Scotch whiskey,
My goodness.
biscuits,
Wow.
right? And ceramics.
Yeah. Boris is all like, we can't sell the ICE Volvos to our own people. We might as well send them over to you.
I cannot believe, Jake, that I'm going to be able to get my ceramics cheaper than what I'm getting them now.
Yeah, I know, right? I can get my BMWs slightly cheaper. That's British motor vehicle. Right?
However, UK farmers say the deal will mean that they will be undercut by cheap imports. So it's not all beers and Skittles, Jake.
No, it's actually the exact opposite.
It's not all ceramics.
It's the
not
exact
all
deficit.
ceramics and whiskey, Jake.
No.
But the UK government says the deal will contain protections for farmers, such as a cap on tariff-free imports for 15 years. So there you go.
See, we don't buy much beef. We don't buy much lamb. We actually don't buy much. We don't buy much meat at all from the UK.
Right, because this is about the UK stuff, right? This is because of Brexit. Because they're not part of that anymore, right? They're not part of the EU.
Well, they've lost out on the EU free trade deals.
Right, so we've had to go back and say, hey, let's go back to the drawing board and do the whole thing again.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing stopping us from trading in the interim, but a free trade deal essentially states the tariffs on various products. So it's good to be able to have certainty because it means that farmers and farming organisations can be very clear around what the farmers are going to get per kilogram or per pound, if you will, for whatever it is that they purvey. It's a good thing. It's one of the first free trade deals that we've signed in a few years, which is great because we have had a few upsets around the place. But no, it is all in all a good deal.
Oh, good. Summed it up nice. Great.
Look,
it was a good deal.
It's a bit of a token deal, of course, for both us and for them. Because for us, we didn't want to commit to anything new, and certainly there were.
We love the status quo here in Australia.
Exactly, big fan of the status quo. It was ostensibly dealing like the G7 was dealing with a couple of very important things. International actors and threats, both in the cyber.
Love that.
Exactly. Both in the field of cyber terrorism and cyber threats, as well as in the real world, in the non-digital ones and zeros matrix world.
The analog world, yes.
Exactly. So there was a lot of multilateral and multilateral discussions around how the G7 countries will be dealing with each other, because of course China is one of those G7 nations. And Russia was, I think, they were also an observer.
Weren't they?
Well, they've been booted for some time. There was that discussion the last G7 that Trump
they were doping in the G7.
Well, Trump was going to bring them in. Trump is like, it's my G7. I'm going to bring them in. You can come to Mar-a-Lago and we'll have a good old chat about some Trump steaks and some Trump wine. It'll be great.
You didn't tell me you were a Trump impersonator, Jake.
I'm pretty awful at it, but thanks. I'm balding.
Great.
Does that help?
Hey, probably. I'm going to give you some applause for that. Yeah.
Hey,
That's good.
that's good. It's coming through both channels, Greg.
I know, it's magic. See, I hit the stereo button.
So look, it was a good.
I think you just finally have your headphones plugged in properly.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to the discussion about Eminem. This is how I rap. There was a few discussions had between our international partners, Australia, the UK, and the USA had a few chats about China. Yeah. And about Russia and about what they're likely to do. A lot of patrolling around the South China Sea. But some interesting stuff. More stuff to come, I think, over the next little bit, because it's in the lead up to the Glasgow meeting where we're all supposed to talk about climate change.
Yeah, that's going to be a hoot.
It is going to be a hoot.
I look forward to Barnaby Joyce's tweets about that one.
Good old softy ScoMo.
I might have to follow him
at it Twitter. Again.
Since he's the deputy, I don't know. That's how the kids are communicating these days, Jake.
That's true. On Twitter, I think they're doing it on TikTok. You got to come up with a cool dance.
I'm not. Oh god. Oh god. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that path now, Jake. No. We did skip a story. Are you happy to skip that story?
Oh, so happy.
Okay. Don't tell our audience what it was about.
Okay.
It was about the Prime Minister being linked to QAnon.
The story aired, Greg.
Did it air?
I didn't watch it.
Oh, I didn't watch it either.
Yeah, it was boring.
Was it?
Yeah, like the story about it not going to air was more interesting than the actual story.
Is he actually a QAnon person?
Well, somebody that the Prime Minister of Australia is attached to by way of a friendship is a QAnon subscriber.
Oh, I didn't know that, Jake.
Yeah, again, the salacious gossip around the story is more interesting than the story itself.
It is. I'm very interested in that.
It's like why did Jan from marketing get her hair changed? Somebody said it's because her husband prefers blondes.
Oh, I thought it was because she was going bald.
See, the discussion around the topic is more interesting than the topic itself.
I think going bald is pretty interesting.
It is pretty interesting.
Okay, well, anyway, he's downplayed it.
He has. He's gotten through it.
Downplayed his friendship with Tim Stewart.
Yeah, good old Timmy S.
He called the program Pretty Ordinary.
Yeah, it was pretty ordinary reporting with tremendous number of sources.
I think they should win an award, the Pretty Ordinary Award. the Walkleys.
They already have one for it. Yeah, the Walkley Wooden Spoon Award.
should have the Pretty Ordinary, the somewhat ordinary, potentially interesting story award.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, he's down.
It is the sort of thing that the yeah.
Don't they think that there's some like conspiracy, like some. Anyway, I don't even want to go down that path. But anyway, they're okay. They're okay. Anyway, they're okay.
I don't understand QAnon.
No,
I really don't.
I don't either. I don't want to click on that Wikipedia page.
No, the last thing you want to do is to be associated with that, particularly on your work computer.
They purport, Jake, that powerful forces hiding and protecting satanic pedophile rings, and that a secretive individual named Q leaves clues for his followers to decipher on internet forums. I'm stopping reading, Jake.
Yeah. Are you scared?
I am. I'm shaking.
Well, I'm glad you're describing that in audio form because
my Ugg boots.
Yeah, shaking in your Ugg boots, which sounds very comfortable, by the way.
It's a very comfortable shake. It's
comfortable and warm.
It's a considered shake.
You're purporting to shake. Yeah,
I am. I'm purporting to shake. Okay. All right, Jake. When our listeners have finished hating us because we've whispered for so long.
Far too long. It's far too long. It is. I actually don't mind. I know. I actually don't mind recording.
It's quite nice.
Yeah.
I think I'd be less angry if I recorded.
Welcome to the Pouch Whisper edition, where we whisper.
Welcome to the lounge.
The lounge. I like it.
We did the porch for a bit there. Welcome to the porch.
Yeah, and the couch.
That's it. The couch. Welcome to the couch podcast.
Yeah.
It's a surprising amount of words that rhyme with pouch. Slouch.
Yes, welcome to the slouch.
Just lolling about. Anyway, Jake, when our listeners have finished really hating us, what would you like them to do, Jake?
Well, I'd love them to consider going to patreon.com/the Pouch the podcast and consider becoming a patron. They get all these cool benefits like a regular podcast and free of charge. We whisper occasionally as well, and I think people purport to enjoy that. If they're not ready for that level of intimacy, they can certainly go to their podcast application of choice and rate us favorably. Because not only does it make us feel good, not only does it help people to find us, but it also makes us feel good.
Wrong order.
Yes, exactly.
Wrong order.
Exactly. What about you, Greg?
Well,
what do you think our listeners should do?
Yeah, look, if you want to share the love, you can do so by telling your friends, families, and or foes to head to thepouchthepodcast.com/ASMR. My microphone just got caught in my book. And they can choose their favourite podcast player of choice or subscribe that way, Jake.
I've got to be honest, Greg, now that I've been whispering for so long, I'm finding it very difficult to not whisper.
I know. I feel very relaxed. I hope our listeners feel relaxed, Jake.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been so relaxed.
Well, it's been a 2-beer evening, so I think so. Yeah, it has.
Geez, right. Okay. Are they small beers?
No, they're
large beers.
They're middies. They're
Until I go to the
330
pub very
mils.
often, when I go to the pub, I'll have
Are
a
they
small beer,
small?
please.
Yeah.
Does it come in a large?
I'll have a small lager, please.
Do you have a maxi? Do you have a
Oh,
maxi
ouch.
lager?
Very nice.
All right. Anyway, enjoy whatever it is that you're doing tonight.
Yeah, whispering to your partner.
Yeah, enjoy whispering. Carry
Good
this,
night, love.
Carry this feeling with you. We were going to bring back Guru.
Yeah,
Bungadong,
we were.
weren't
Guru Hobunkadong, yeah.
All right. It's probably not considered appropriate these days,
No, it's funny stuff.
is it? Yeah,
It was very clean humour too.
All right.